Hi, and welcome to the Digital EDU Dialogues podcast, where we talk about what's trending in higher education, issues, and offer some practical solutions. I am Angela Britcher, and today Julie Shore is joining me. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, Angela. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you because Julie is the president and founder of Career Development Advisors, a human resources firm which serves clients in more than 20 industries around the US and the globe. And we are in that time where so many people are thinking about career transitions. And in our work at Professor Services, we work with people that are actively seeking career transitions. So we are so glad that you are joining us today. And we're going to talk about all of that, about the work that you do in career development, helping people with transitions, coming up with a plan. And we're going to talk about it from two different perspectives. First, the idea of the adults that we work with and people that are managing those transitions in throughout their lives. And I also want to talk about how you work with students, because you have been really helpful to many of my students.
So thank you. Yes.
Let's start by talking a little bit more about you and tell us about Career Development Advisors and the work that you do with organizations and with people.
Sure. So I started, let me back up. I had my own first kind of core HR consulting firm since 2010, but really niched into the space of career development kind of right before the pandemic. Who knew, right?
Right.
In the fall of summer of 2019, I have always had this just natural draw towards helping folks with their career. And so my HR background certainly lent itself to that. And some of what we'll talk about later is, in order to further your career, you have to let go of some things. And I had to heed my own advice and let go of some of those things, which we'll talk about later. But yes, my firm is very niched in all things career development. So I do retained recruiting work with small businesses and nonprofits, career development work with teams using the Kolbe program, which I'm certified in. And then I do career coaching with individuals ranging from high school age all the way through 70 somethings, trying to figure out, or 80 somethings, what their next act is going to look like and if they're ready to retire or not. And then in that career coaching space, I'm also a corporate, what we call career transition or outplacement provider. So if an organization is going to lay off one person, multiple people, I provide that support as well.
Fantastic. So you are helping all kinds of people in all different phases of their lives and their careers as they make these transitions and changes. And I'm wondering if you could share, you shared this with me before, the statistic that you have on how many careers and jobs we can expect to have.
Sure. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it hasn't changed for a while, I feel like that stat came out in like 2014. I looked recently and it's not changed much, is on average 3 to 5 careers. So not jobs, 3 to 5 careers in a lifetime, and on average 9 to 11 jobs. Now, the funny thing about that 9 to 11 job mark is I think statistically, the majority of those tend to be in up until our early 20s. So you being a professor certainly can appreciate with your students. And I know with my own kids, they've had to make a couple job changes just due to their schedule and employers not being flexible. So yes, 3 to 5 careers in a lifetime, 9 to 11 jobs. And a lot of the folks I coach in that kind of mid to senior level, it's like giving themselves permission to make that change, when in reality, it's like, oh gosh, you're kind of behind if you've only done one thing so far. So
I love that perspective, because as someone who has made career transitions, that idea that it can be exciting, that it's not, oh, I'm getting laid off, I have to figure the next thing out, or, oh, I have to do it. Could you talk a little bit more about the idea that it's exciting for people and people are looking for what's next?
Yeah, I think, while I'm not in higher education, I am a fan of always learning. I'm a firm believer you can glean something from everybody you speak with, even doing this podcast with you today, Angela, something you read, that, it gets you to think differently. And unfortunately, too many of us tell ourselves these negative stories, and that just progresses. Again, you're in education. The older we get, it's like we tell ourselves these negative stories like, oh, but working over here can't be better. Could it? And, it's just willing to take that chance. And then we tend to just sort of stay in our lane and only do what's comfortable for us. So it is hard, but I really love hearing everybody's individual story and helping them figure out, all right, what are your talents that you want to use next? And it's really a big, I know there's lots of buzz around mindset, but it's a huge mindset issue when you're in job search mode. It's like, oh, I wonder if the next person I talk to will have the job I want. And you have to kind of flip that mindset to, I'm going to see if this would really be a good fit. And I'd love to meet someone new and have a conversation. So I do a lot of work in that space as well with
that adjusting how we're thinking about work and careers.
Huge. Yes.
And talk about the Kolbe method, because you and I've talked a little bit about that and about that idea. You use the word talents. How do we take those talents and skills we have and use those to find what's next?
Yes. So throughout our careers, mine included in college, this is not a knock on counselors by any stretch of the imagination, but most folks are accustomed to taking either interest surveys of some kind, which are great, or personality tests. So we're all familiar, well, many of us are, with Myers-Briggs. I don't know if you've taken that, Angela. I took it a few times. Yeah, mine have changed. I've actually wobbled from an E to an I from time to time, depending on the situation. The DISC, the strength finders, those are all wonderful, but Kolbe is the only tool out there that assesses your innate way in which you take purposeful action. So the theory that's behind it that's valid and reliable is that you are born with these innate instincts in terms of how you take action when you're striving or focusing or working. And so that's the missing piece that most people aren't aware of, especially when it comes to a workplace. So I use that with all my career clients. There's an application that starts with, there's actually one for children, but I'm certified in the youth tool, which is age 13 to roughly 21 till they get some work experience. And then once an individual has work experience, we do the Kolbe A index, it's called, and it can very quickly help me steer clients not only necessarily in the type of work, but the environment and type of boss. So some of us thrive in no 2 days are alike and work awesome under pressure. And some of us, that's like our worst nightmare. And so there could be, I'm trying to think of an example, even somebody in, marketing and sales is usually fast paced, but some folks need a smaller, more predictable environment. And some folks will thrive and flourish in that ever evolving or smaller sector type of environment, and vice versa. If I have someone who's super creative and can't have any 2 days alike and they're stuck being told stay in their lane all day, they're not happy with their jobs.
So I love this idea that we're thinking, instead of just like the career path and here's the job application that I found online and I just need to send out 100 applications to get an interview. Share a little bit more about how you help people get from that mindset into use the Kolbe tools to say, all right, so instead of just sending out 100 applications, we're going to work this way to find the next thing.
Right. And if I can back up even one step further. So most people will come to me on the career coaching side saying, I need a resume. And I actually do not work with people only on resumes. It's in a rare occasion because I need people to back up a moment and really assess, what do they want? What are their values? What are their cognitive talents that the Kolbe assesses? Because otherwise, I always tell people it's kind of like building a house. You can't slap the roof on before you pour the foundation, frame out the walls, put in the windows. And that's essentially when people are just blindly applying to jobs in pretty much any industry, and hearing crickets, they think, oh, it must be my resume. It could be. But the statistic is that 70 to 80% of jobs, even through COVID, are found through networking versus those cold applications. And there are more than, I should look at a recent count, but more than 250 applicant tracking systems, which are those very tedious systems you have to upload your applications to, on the market. And, toss that in with no two recruiting processes are alike, and there's a lot of subjectivity. So it's no wonder people feel like they're just stuck in this hamster wheel. And so the Kolbe is one of the tools, I would say probably the hallmarks. I've developed sort of a 12-step process I walk people through, Angela, when they're, have some work experience and trying to figure out what's next for them, either, kind of behind the scenes or more actively. But one of them is assessing their core values, because what matters to you when you're 22 versus 35 versus 45 versus 75 is very different. And if you go to market with that same resume and you're just uploading and you haven't really thought about it, the person on the other side is going to actually pick up on that. And so you have to be really clear on your value proposition. before you
Mm.
it and just
Mhm.
throw your resume out there, especially when you're kind of thinking about shifting gears or maybe shifting industries.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, especially the older we get. I think when we're younger and it's just, I got to go and I got to try some things. And I think about my students, and I often encourage them, like, go try it on. Try it
Yeah,
on for a little while.
for
But
sure.
as we get older and more mature in our careers, we have options, and we
Yes.
get to say, like you said, we get to say, no, where do I want to be? So what a wonderful tool to assess that. You also talked about networking, and let's talk a little bit more about that. You and I talked about this on your
Sure.
podcast recently, about this importance of
Yep.
networking.
Yes.
And so, yes, share what do you share with your clients about the importance of networking? Because I know, again, you and I have talked about this a little. People are a little afraid of it, and I think especially
Mhm.
in higher ed, I see this a lot. It's like, oh, well, I mean, I can't go on social media to promote myself or engage. So, talk about that.
Right. Yeah. I always try to, outside of folks in the sales and business development and marketing, I'll say sales and business development. They're like, sure. I'm like, I have to hold them back. They're ready to go. That's natural for them. A lot of them. Right. But I always ask people, what's your comfort level with networking, like on a scale from 1 to 10? And most people are like down in the 4 or 5 range. And so what I try to do is break it down to help them in a way that's comfortable for them, and knowing their Kolbe index helps me with that as well. And for marketing reasons, I can't get into the super nitty gritty on the Kolbe, but there's more information on my website. But anyway, in terms of the networking, I try to break it down in a way that's comfortable for them. It doesn't mean, go to a chamber event and, excuse the language, but sort of vomit business cards. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean you have to go into a cold room. In fact, here's my plug for networking right now. It's December 8th. And this is one of the best times of year to have conversation. That's all it is. And here again is that mindset thing, Angela. When people, so that 70 to 80% mark is still holds true for how jobs are found. If you go into networking thinking, oh, is this person going to have the job for me? You're almost going to always be set up to fail. Rather think of it as, yeah, what can I learn? As I just mentioned, what can I glean from this particular person? And so I help people break it down. Everything from, yes, the only social media I'm pretty, I don't know if pushy is the right word or persuasive to get people to use is
Active.
LinkedIn. I get it. I was a holdout on Facebook till maybe like 5 years ago. I was a late joiner because in my profession in HR, it was just sort of a nightmare at the time. I was like, nope. But for my business, I had to learn to get over it and just do it in a way that's authentic for me. And so same thing with LinkedIn and networking is, statistically, it's probably higher than this. I used to do LinkedIn webinars. I'm going to say it's like 93 to 96% of recruiters are on LinkedIn. I know myself, when I do retained recruiting work, I spend, or when I have a recruiter helping me, we are data mining in LinkedIn and perusing. So, I always tell job seekers that's a networking tool that works for you while you're sleeping. So you don't even have to do much. Certainly there are ways to engage for sure. But in terms of networking and before our time here today, I was reflecting on, okay, what do I practice? Do I practice what I preach with the folks I coach? And I look back on my kind of 4 or 5 core jobs before I was working for myself, and only one of them was a job posting. The rest were all networked opportunities. And the one I remember was I was set up to do an informational interview, and literally the day before someone resigned, and he didn't even tell me. Like, I'm sitting with the VP of HR and he's like, oh, well, I know this was an informational interview, but someone resigned yesterday. Do you want to interview? And I was kind of like no advance notice. So
Not prepared.
well, yeah, good, bad, or indifferent. So I did get that job, but all the others were networked opportunities. And so the minute, and that's usually when I start working with folks, is they feel stuck because they're trying to be that follow the rule person, apply, and hearing nothing. The minute you integrate some sort of regular, steady conversation, informational interviews are part of networking as well, the wheels start turning because this person thinks of that person who thinks of that person. And in this digital age, which can be great, it can also be overwhelming, right? Like you and your jobs, me and my, it's like, how do you cut through the noise? But I know if someone gets in front of me for a request, like, oh, Julie, I'm like, oh, yes, I'd love to help you. But, you were just buried in my 99, unread emails right now. And I'm so sorry. So, that networking piece is huge to job search success. especially when you're not, what I'll say, sort of hair on fire looking for a job. Like, it's a great practice to integrate so you do get comfortable and it's not seeming like, oh, I have to hurry up and speed date because I need a
Right.
job.
Yeah, these are such great ideas. Like you keep saying it's about having conversations. I think that's what's so important when we think about networking. It's not the business card vomit. It's not, I have to post something relevant and meaningful on social media every day. It's about those connections and conversations. I think that's how we got reacquainted, right? So Julie and I went to high school together 30 years ago and reconnected because of your presence on LinkedIn, right? And because you were offering such valuable information, and it was easy to reach out and have a conversation, say, wow, my students are asking for what you're offering. Let's have a conversation. And this has led to all of this really fun work that we get to do, as well as how much my students appreciate you as well. So with that, we're going to take a 30-second break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about how you work with students and families, and some of the work that you have done with my students that I am so grateful for, and that I know they are as well. So we'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Professor Services. Looking for a job in teaching? Need to expand your network? Want to boost your income? Whatever it is, the expert team at Professor Services has you covered. From helping higher ed faculty find new jobs, to essential tools such as cover letters and CVs, to applying to jobs for you, Professor Services equips you to nail your job search. Don't stress over the job hunt. Maximize your potential and crush your next opportunity with support from our team of experienced administrators, mentors, and educators. Discover how the team at Professor Services can help. Visit professorservices.com today to get started and kickstart your career in higher education.
I am Angela Britcher, and I'm back with Julie Shore, the president and founder of Career Development Advisors. And we are going to switch gears just a little bit, because there's a lot of commonalities between working with college students and the high school students and families you work with, as well as those transitions for adults. So talk a little bit about that aspect of the work that you do.
Sure. Well, being a college professor, you certainly can appreciate, and I'm sure here, right, in the nature of the work you do, college is expensive. It's valuable, but it's expensive. And really, I think what fueled my fire to really help more students is just having my own kids walk that journey. And going back to what we talked about earlier in terms of the 3 to 5 careers, 3 to 5 careers, 9 to 11 jobs. My oldest daughter, I didn't get right on the first try. She actually, her career assessments said marketing, business, and sort of like social work adoption counselor. And so she tried a school in business and marketing, and she ended up switching, and she's a social worker. She's graduating in 2 weeks. And so, that was the joke. Gosh, the career coach didn't get it right. I was like, well, yes and no, because technically there's 3 to 5 options. It was within her top 3. But, I think to your point about go try it on with your students. Yes, high school students, I just, even our family friends, I'm like, gosh, if your kids are even this much interested in something, job shadow. And I would still love, I know at least locally in central Pennsylvania, there's some schools that have really nailed that and some that are still working on that. But I think that's a huge benefit. It doesn't cost anybody anything. Yes, time, maybe a day from a professional. I actually worked on a really cool project with an organization that's sort of like a property management company in Harrisburg, where we actually just worked on building their brand and their pipeline. And they just hosted their first job shadow program formally with one particular school. That was a huge success. And the employees there really seemed to enjoy it. But in terms of how I work with students, yes, everything from let's job shadow, let's have a conversation. I have participated locally in lots of mock interviews at the high school or college level. And then I do also on occasion offer workshops. What I have found is it's interesting that more and more people just want to work one-on-one. So I try to offer lots of different options at different price points for people. But then I do work with high school students and college students, walking through that Kolbe version with them, asking them questions that, because I'm not mom or dad, they tend to sort of open up, and I'm not an educator. My vantage point is I want you to be employable and a productive member of society. Ultimately, that's what we're aiming for, right? And I always tell people I do not have the magic 8 ball, the magic crystal ball, but through our conversation and through some pointed exercises, I can point you in the right direction to say, you need to look at, and usually it's a list of, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 7 things to check out. Two really fun success stories. I would say they ranged in age, maybe 17 to 21. Long story short, over the last year, and they were just stuck. And at the end, we did the assessments, we ended up getting, them a resume, applied for a job, coached them. And, the smile on their faces was like, I know everybody having that resume, it feels so tangible, and I get it, everybody wants it, but yeah, so I have a couple different programs. And then I do a debrief with the parents as well. So again, don't proclaim to be you as the educator, but more having worked in HR for all those years. And I'm still certified nationally in HR because I want to stay on top of what's going on so I can properly advise clients in that regard. And I may have gone off the rails on your question, Angela.
No, that's fine. And
I want helping the kids.
Well, and I think that's what's so important, that just the passion that you bring and that you certainly brought to. Julie spoke to one of my classes that had juniors and seniors. They're getting ready to graduate, and they're like, we need to hear from someone to tell us, like, how do we talk when we get to school? What do we do about this and that? And you brought that energy and made it not seem so scary, right? Like, that, you're already doing a lot of these things. And you talked about 2 things about the job shadowing. And I was thinking about that along with you did mention this, but I know you work with this too, is with internships and the idea of how those are really networking, right? And and encouraging students to do those informational interviews. Try it on, try before you buy. So
yeah, and it works both ways. It's really to the advantage of the employer too, because they're nervous about the relationship. And yes, I am a firm believer. I have employed high schoolers as interns, even in my small business, to help with marketing. I've had college interns come help me at trade shows. I have an intern now from college as well, helping me with my marketing. And he just dives right in and does it. And, I'm a huge fan and advocate for our youth of trying things. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. And I actually had another in college intern who helped me with one specific digital marketing campaign when I was doing a lot of events. So, it works both ways, that they get to try things on and say, not sure, fills a short-term need. But I think employers really need to do more of that so that these students can see before they go in, because students don't want to go into a job and out year after year, and employers hire someone, train them, and have them leave. And, I think when I'll say certain employees or leaders make blanket statements, I think it's like anything else, right? Like, you just can't stereotype one way or the other, but I have worked with a ton of smart students, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity because I learned from them too.
Yeah, I feel that way every day. They teach me so much.
Absolutely.
And along those lines, talk about what are the big skills that employers are looking for. And that was something I know my students were curious about. Like, when they think of professionalism and professional skills, what are employers looking for? And I think this applies to students as well as adults that are interviewing in the workplace.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. So again, I do some retained recruiting work now with some small businesses and some larger nonprofits. And, just over my years of recruiting, I feel like they still boil down to 3 or 4 of the same things. There are very few professions where you don't have to have interpersonal skills and talk to people. There's a couple I can think of where they're maybe not as people intense, like an actuary, right? An underwriter, but those interpersonal skills are huge. I think coupled with that, the verbal communication skills and the writing. Oh my goodness. It just happened to me this morning. I was actually, so anytime I do recruiting, I email the candidate first to schedule the telephone interview. And they emailed back with all types of improper punctuation, grammar. And there's not, I'm not recruiting. Most of the positions I recruit for are in a professional environment. And I wanted to cancel the interview right there. But anyway, through our correspondence, she didn't want the pay. But I was like, oh my goodness, she can't even put her best foot forward in a full sentence and proper capitalization and punctuation, even if it's a 2-sentence, yes, I'm available, thank you, comma, Julie. It just caps up and down. So to the point of writing skills, again, you don't have to write like an attorney if you're not applying to be an attorney, but just simple, basic, grammatical, proofread, that professional presence comes through in everything you do. I mean, I coach everyone who I am working with in job search mode. You are always on, because you never know. You could be in line at the grocery store, it could be a text, it could be a phone call, whatever. But I think the interpersonal skills, the writing skills, the communication skills, and I think, everyone says strong work ethic, but I think you demonstrate your conscientiousness by really being astute in every part of that interview process and showing that you're willing to learn. I don't, some jobs, sure, maybe you need to be like 90% on every job. I say a good benchmark is about 80% you feel confident in the skill set and that you're excited about doing as well. So I think it still boils down to, certainly technology plays a part depending on the role, but I think it's really hard to teach. I once had a business owner say, sometimes I have to teach the people I hire manners, and it's hard to do that. So I think just being a professional, professional presence, be yourself, strong writing skills, strong verbal communication skills. And eventually that emotional intelligence will come. That's a big buzzword out there now as well.
I promise you, Julie, I am working with my students on those writing skills.
I know you are.
Interpersonal skills. I just had to say to students last night, I have a class of students that are not all communication students. They are across majors, and we're working on an assignment. And I had to say, my expectation is that this is your lab and you will practice good communication skills with this assignment, and every answer will be in a complete sentence. And you realize it's just getting lost. They don't have to practice that as often. And so to me, and that's what I always tell them, I'm preparing you for work. I'm preparing you for those work emails, for those interview emails, because it is missing. So I am so grateful that those are your top things that you need.
No, I love that you do that. No, you're not going to accept the BRBs and the LOLs or whatever.
No emojis in your paper. No hashtags. No, I don't want to see your meme unless the assignment calls for creating a meme. We do that sometimes.
Correct. Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Before we wrap up talking about students, I would love for you to talk about the role of volunteering and how that can be a source of networking and help us get to that next job. I know my students really enjoyed you talking about that.
Yes. No, that is like the best kept secret, is to volunteer. And there's a couple different ways depending on, whomever's watching or listening. Certainly volunteering outside of your skill set or within your skill set. There's 2 websites I often refer my folks to. One is volunteermatch.org, where you can volunteer for just like a one-off situation, or like a Caitlin Smiles in our area. You can go there, pick up the information. But anyway, you're still interacting with people. There's also a website called, I think it's called catchafire.org, where you can volunteer in a professional capacity. But yeah, volunteering is like an instant, easy way to meet people. And it doesn't, the conversation just flows because you're there for a purpose and an intention versus, you're really focusing on serving others rather than serving yourself. And a natural byproduct of that is volunteering. And the other piece, I don't know if I mentioned with your class, Angela, was, especially if you are volunteering on a regular basis, there could be a lot of retired folks. Who has the most robust networks on the planet? Folks that have had these wonderful careers, for many years. So anyway, yeah, volunteering I think is huge. And I always encourage people to do something they're interested in, because it's going to make it easier. And that goes back to something we talked about a few minutes ago, in that the whole networking thing is learning to just be yourself and have conversations in a way that's comfortable for you. And it's very different for everyone. And I spend a lot of time helping my folks strategize, what would work best for them and make them feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, when we're volunteering, what a great opportunity to just be yourself, right? We're doing something. I feel like we're usually doing something physically active and interacting with others. So we're not thinking so much about what's my elevator pitch, right? This isn't the time for the elevator pitch. This is the time to just have conversations that can lead to the next thing. And I'm teaching a class right now that another professor designed this assignment. And he has students volunteer as part of a public relations class.
Oh.
And so they have to do so many volunteer hours, but then we have them create marketing materials and public relations materials that organization can use. So it leads to the students having a body of work they can add to their portfolio as well. That, you know, whether the organization uses their press release or their social posts, it doesn't matter. They've done the work and they can give it to them. And what happens is that students feel really good because they have all these pieces, but I've just been getting emails. They just wrapped up this assignment. I'm getting these emails like, I'm so grateful for this assignment. This was, you know, soul work. Like, I didn't know I was going to feel good about taking this class, right? And they're coming to the end of the semester and they're feeling that feeling we get when we contribute to something bigger than ourselves. So what better way to like, oh, I'm going to volunteer to network to hopefully get to my next job, or maybe I don't have a job right now, so I'm going to spend my time volunteering with this agenda. But you realize like, oh no, I'm showing up in service. So when we show up in service, I just think magic can really happen.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it takes, for people who are overly nervous about it, it really takes the pressure off, because you should, and if again, it is in the season too, right? It is in giving that we shall receive. And that's really what happens, you know, when you shift the focus for how can I help you? And in fact, that's one of the closing scripts I often encourage my people to use is after you're doing, you know, gathering your information, having your conversation is, you've been so helpful. What can I do for you? Is there something you're curious about or something I could do to help you? So, it really is that two-way back and forth. And it may not be now, it may not be immediate. I'll just tell you real fast, Angela, I know we're might be tight on time, but I once had a client a couple of years ago who she was in job search mode sort of quietly, and someone who met her 4 years prior remembered her and came back to her and said, "You were so impressive, Emily, that, you know, I have this position now and I'd love for you to come meet our team and interview." And literally that's what happened. She interviewed, they threw the job posting up, 2 days after her, and I'm paraphrasing, like her third interview, just because it's policy. And then she had the job offer. So that's another reason why networking is so important, because it's proactive versus being reactionary.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. So we're going to take another short break, 30 seconds. And when we come back, we're going to talk about one of the things that Julie and I love to talk about, and that's how we juggle all of it as working parents. We will be right back.
This episode of DigitalEDU Dialogues is brought to you by the Babb Group. The demands for teaching and online learning are constantly evolving. Don't get left behind. Carve out a competitive edge and give students engaging learning experiences with support from the Babb Group's team of course design experts. As experienced online faculty and instructional designers, the Babb Group knows how to craft those aha moments for students and meet outcomes for every modality: online, hybrid, and face-to-face. Creating engaging, welcoming, and inclusive learning spaces for students of all ages and abilities has never been more important. Discover how the Babb Group can help you by visiting their website today.
I am Angela Britcher, and I'm back with Julie Shore, the founder of Career Development Advisors, and we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics: how to juggle all of this while being working parents. And I know for me, when I've had career transitions, that's like my first thought is, wait, you think about, how am I going to pay the mortgage, or how am I going to take care of this family? And so I tend to limit myself, right? Because it's like, oh, yikes, but I have to think about these things. So when you are working with your clients, how do you help them navigate those challenges when they're thinking about their families?
Right. So I think it goes down to the values that I mentioned really early in our conversation today, Angela, that if I have people tell me their number one priority is whatever, work-life balance or time with family, but they're worried about making X dollars, but they don't need to make X amount of dollars, then it's like, wait, we go back. I literally type it up. That's like something it's the pillar of my career coaching. And they're like, and they'll laugh and be like, oh, that's right, I did say that, money's not as important, or where the money is, significant. And, how do you juggle it all? It's, well, let's explore different options, especially since COVID. That has been one of the blessings, I would say. Not everyone will agree with me, for working parents. And I say that because I did it 21 years ago when it wasn't cool and it wasn't a thing and it wasn't acceptable. I walked away from my corporate job and did the juggle of the part-time consulting stuff in the evenings or when kids were napping or whatever. And my kids grew up knowing, shh, mom's on an interview, shh. And now, people can have a lot more freedom for, the doorbell ringing, the dog barking, all that good stuff. But it was totally not okay 21 years ago. And so I would say, there's certainly options for moms or dads or, working parents, in that it's the right organizations will be more focused on outcomes and results rather than, okay, are you wiggling your mouse at 7:30 and wiggling it again at 12 and 3:30, right? So I think you have to be clear as the professional or the worker, what do you want and what's your value proposition? And then if you're good at what you do, you're going to find it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And you'll make it work. And the only other thing I'll say is, that flexibility, again, if you can manage to those results and flexibility is something you value, you can make it work and you can command the fees or the income, based on your experience.
I think that's such a great reassurance for people. I've certainly lived that life working from home way before it was cool. I've been at home for 14 years and worked on virtual teams that long. And even, along with parenting, I think another thing a lot of people are dealing with is being that sandwich generation, right? Where we're caretaking adults too. I remember working from home, my daughter's at school. I'm like, sweet, I've got all day. And my dad would be driving through my town and was at an age where he would have to make regular pit stops. And he would stop in my house and I'd be in a virtual meeting and he'd yell like, hey, honey, I'm just here to use your bathroom. In a meeting with, a team in Amsterdam, like, oh, that's just my dad.
Yes. No, I even put signs on my door sometimes, it's like, training in progress, meeting in progress, because you're right. And to your earlier point of, how do you see that broader perspective? I'll just tell you real quick, when I walked away from corporate America in 2006, I was spinning my wheels and I'm supposed to know how to do this. I worked in HR, I was a recruiter, but all my brain went to, because I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC at the time, was like big global organizations. And I was like, I couldn't see anything but what I knew. And same thing with the clients that I have the pleasure of partnering with, is they only see what they know. And so I have so much fun. I really feel like I have the best job in the world, where I get to open people's eyes or at least ask questions. And they're like, oh, I never thought that I could transfer, my marketing skills to healthcare over from insurance, or, vice versa.
You said something a few minutes ago about this idea of kind of giving some things up. And it was something that you had said something similar to me about this when we saw each other over the winter. And it was about this idea, like, do I have to work so much? And was I willing to give things up? So I'm wondering if you could share, we'll kind of wrap up here with, you could share your journey about being an entrepreneur, managing a busy family, and what are your best practices for making it all work? How does it work for your family?
I'm still trying to figure that out, truth be told. But I think when you can be okay, for me, I'll just say, I was a relentless people pleaser, still maybe a little, but still working on boundaries, right? But I think when you succumb to the fact that you can't be everything to everyone equally all the time, or you'll burn out, and giving yourself the okay to do that, that's for me when, it makes it better. I'll say, not always all okay. And learning to let go of things as a working mom. I may have shared with you, like, my laundry. Yes, you can assign your kids tasks and all of that, but that used to drive me crazy. But guess what? We have laundry folding parties once a week now, and it's in my basement and the door is shut and I don't see it because I have to focus on other more important things. And I think giving yourself the grace too, that if you decide to set a schedule a particular way or focus on one thing for these next 3 months, it's okay. You can change it in 3 more months. That, your schedule has to ebb and flow. At least mine does, with the seasons of my kids' life and the literal seasons of the year. And it's okay. Not just because I'm an entrepreneur. When I worked with other folks too, that was my number one value, is flexibility if I were to work with them. And they honored that. And so I think that's where, again, you have to be really clear about what your non-negotiables are and setting boundaries. So, the whole reason we work is so we can have lives and spend time with those we love, right? And so you don't want to be miserable the whole way around. So I think, you just have to be okay with defining priorities and boundaries, which I know for me is just ever evolving.
Yes, it is always evolving. And I think especially as our children age and grow. Julie, anything else you want to share with us today about these walking through the career transitions of life?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say, and I share this with, potential clients I work with is, if you have thought about making a change, whether it's just a job, a career, your hours, whatever it is, you make your circumstances better. I'd say once, twice, 3 times, you owe it to yourself to kind of dig into that a little bit better. With a friend, a family member, journal, write it down, a girlfriend, whatever, because it's probably not going to go away. You can ignore it. And last closing breath, I was interviewing a former client of mine, and I asked her why she took a particular job over the course of her career. And she said, I just decided, she's very point blank. She's like, I just decided that if I died tomorrow and hadn't tried, I would be very upset. So I just had to try. And, that has stuck with me. Again, a learning from a client of mine. It's like, will you regret not trying, not giving it a try? And, my 2 final words, I said final already, but 2 final mantras that I really try to myself live by and I work with clients on is, life's about choices and you have to focus on what you can control. And if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So there you have it.
Excellent. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
The Digital EDU Dialogues podcast is brought to you by the Adjunct family of companies.